Well, good evening, everyone. I want to also extend a word of welcome to each and every one of you here in the church online joining us, and especially to the 6 people we've got, mostly in this part of the church, who are preparing to receive sacraments in a couple days. So we're praying for you. We're so excited for you. For those of you who live nearby, you might have driven down Dunbrack recently, and just a few blocks south of here, you might have noticed this building that's being demolished, right? It's a full-on demolition site. I don't think they've used explosives yet, but they've definitely had the old wrecking ball out, which every little boy's dream, I'll speak for myself anyways, was to be able to operate one of those guys and just unleash the awesome power of destruction, right? Take down a building. And, stressful day at home? No problem. Take it out at work, right? It just got me thinking, if you've got a building in disrepair, you've got 2 options. What do? 1, deconstruction, or 2, renovation, right? Those are your 2 main choices. One approach is to take out the structure from the outside, knocking it down. And the other is from within to bring renewal while building on that solid foundation. Now, as I look around the world today, my observation is that we're living in an age of deconstruction. I studied philosophy over 20 years ago, so I don't remember most of it, but popular at the time was this idea of deconstructionism, and I think it's still quite popular today. We've got ideas, let's tear them down. Let's criticize, let's find fault. And we see the effects of that on social media. We see that in our cancel culture. We see this in food as well, by the way. I don't know if you knew this. I was at a restaurant not that long ago, and they put this plate in front of me. It looks something like this. It's like, what is this? Oh, it's a deconstructed Caesar salad. It's really hipster. I'm like, the whole point of eating out is so somebody else will prepare the food for me. I don't have to do it myself. Or we see deconstruction in all kinds of other ways, in institutions, right? Where there's suspicion of governments, of those in authority, medical professionals, we have these movements to defund the police. There's this default to deconstruct. It's like we've discovered a new tool. And it's very helpful in some situations. It can bring a very important perspective, but it's like we're using this tool all the time, absolutely in every case. And deconstruction, it's been applied to our understanding of the human person, our core-most identity, to relationships, even to marriage. Now, right off the bat, as I'm talking about this, I realize it's a very complex issue. And it's far beyond me. I'm actually struggling to comprehend it myself. So I want you to know I feel woefully inadequate to be talking about this. And I realize maybe something I say could be misinterpreted or could cause confusion or hurt. And that's not my goal. But I am trying to observe what I'm seeing in the world. And I see these ways of deconstructing that have become so dominant. And I'm asking myself why. Why, governments, institutions, relationships, why are we deconstructing? And I think at its core, we know there's a problem. We feel the problem. The building is in disrepair. There's abuse, there's corruption, and one response is to tear it all down. Tear down the building. And it's as though every problem in the world could be viewed even through the lens of power. There's an unequal distribution of power, so we deconstruct. Take down the power structures, redistribute the power. Now it's Holy Thursday, and you're like, okay, Father, thanks for the philosophy lecture. Where are you going with this? Well, on this day, we celebrate 2 institutions that Jesus himself established at the Last Supper, the institution of the Eucharist and the institution of the priesthood. And the 2 are tied together in that we need priests in order to sacrifice the this sacrament of Jesus in his body and blood, the Eucharist, as we believe he is truly present. Now, as I mentioned, we're in this age of deconstructionism, and so even these have been subject to this same effect. And I would say for the last 500 years or so, since the beginning of the Protestant Reformation particularly, there has been this deconstruction of the Eucharist. And I think largely it's due to a lack of understanding. And so I'm not finding fault, but in many cases, many churches, their experience of Sunday is music and preaching, but they totally miss out on the gift of the Eucharist, this thing that Jesus himself instituted at the Last Supper. And by the way, I just want to say I have the utmost respect for Christians of all denominations. I have so many dear friends in other churches, and I love them. They love me. They have so much respect for the Catholic Church. But as I say, I see this, the Eucharist being deconstructed. And today, I want to talk specifically about the priesthood and deconstructing the priesthood, which is a bit awkward for me because I am a priest, so it kind of feels like, shameless self-promotion. But to get back to the building analogy, the structure's in grave despair, or disrepair, I should say. It's not safe anymore. And there's an attempt to deconstruct to respond to the problems that we see. And just to name it, there are some grave problems that we've seen in the priesthood, especially over the last 50, 70 years. Things that are being exposed to the light. Horrible kinds of abuse of position, of trust, physical, sexual abuse, cover-ups, the abuse and mistreatment of the indigenous people and their culture. And I think at the heart of it is the abuse of power. A fancy word for this problem is clericalism, where priests, bishops abuse their power. And so the reaction to that problem is to deconstruct. The church has too much power. Priests have too much power. We need to take away that power. We need to redistribute it. Maybe married priests, maybe that's the answer, or maybe women priests. That's going to bring more balance. And those are two very different matters, by the way, and I don't have time to get into all the nuances of it. But the point is, there are problems that we see even in the priesthood, and the world is proposing a solution: deconstruction. But I want to today take a look at the Jesus solution to the power dynamic, because he was the one who instituted the priesthood in the first place. He was the one who ordained 12 men at the Last Supper. And by the way, these guys were all imperfect. I don't know if you knew that, but these are the guys handpicked by Jesus. One of them betrayed him. 10 of them ran away when he was arrested. And only one, the youngest guy, John, he was the one who actually showed up at the foot of the cross as Jesus was dying. Now, unless Jesus made some kind of a mistake here when he instituted the priesthood, I think we need to look at what he was really doing. So he ordains them at the Last Supper. He shares with them this sacred power to celebrate the sacraments, starting with the Eucharist. He says this at the Last Supper: "This is my body that is for you. Do this in memory of me." And Father Alex, Father Michael, and I are going to celebrate the sacrament with all of you a little bit later on. This very thing, this sacrament of the body and blood of Jesus. At other moments, he gave them the power to forgive sins and to baptize, to heal, to cast out demons, the power to preach good news and to be leaders. And from the earliest moments of bestowing this priestly power on the 12 men, he knew that there was the potential for corruption and abuse. And so he offered a solution. And Jesus baked it right into the DNA of the priesthood. So they're there at the Last Supper, the sacred meal. Halfway through the meal, Jesus is halfway through the ordination ritual for these guys, and he hits pause. right in the middle of everything. And he gets up, he takes off his outer garments, and he gets down on his knees, and he washes the feet of these 12 men. He washes the muck off of their feet that was from the streets of Jerusalem. And in the middle of it all, Simon Peter, he gets up and he's like, "You'll never wash my feet." The guy's so dense. I can relate to him. And it's just like, you still don't get it. Jesus is like, if I don't do this for you, you will never understand that your priesthood needs to be about washing the feet of other people. Allow me to do this. And as if it wasn't clear enough, at the end of washing these 24 stinky feet, Jesus says, "So if I, your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet." And I wonder if that line, "Do this in memory of me," might even apply to this humble act of service. You want to talk about power? Like, who is the most powerful person in all of human history? Jesus. Hands down, it's no competition. Jesus. And what did he do with that power? He washed feet. And you might be thinking, well, isn't that touching? You know, it's really nice that he got around to doing that night at the Last Supper. Well, you see, the point is this: the world's solution in the face of the problems of power is to deconstruct. Or that's certainly a dominant solution. Eliminate the power, limit the power, knock down power structures. And I think what Jesus does is far more radical. He actually turns the whole thing on its head, and he says this: I am going to redefine the meaning of power itself. In the middle of the Roman Empire, by the way, this empire that was built entirely on the acquisition of power, an institution that was designed to dominate other people. And Jesus says, basically, the very reason that power exists, I hope you're listening, the very reason that power exists is so that it can be used to serve others. It's not about chasing after position and prestige. It's about humility. It's about washing feet. I think that's the solution. We don't need deconstruction or demolition. We need a renewal, a renovation. Dare I say, a divine renovation. You know, I'm all about that. We need to rebuild and renew on the solid foundation that Jesus himself laid. And I'm all for accountability. I'm all for transparency. I'm all for the co-responsibility with the laity, that priests and lay people can be working side by side in this mission that Jesus has entrusted to us. You know, for the last 7 years, I've been working out of a senior leadership team with lay people, women as well, who are amazing leaders, and I've been so blessed by that. I'll never go back to another way of leading. We need priests who will exercise power through service and sacrifice. After the homily, we'll have the washing of the feet. And it's this ritual we do on Holy Thursday during the liturgy where the priest unites himself to this service of Jesus. And Father Ox and I, we're actually talking about this. Which one of us is going to wash the feet tonight? We're kind of fighting about it, actually. He's the presider tonight, but I'm the pastor. But since I'm such a humble guy, I thought, maybe I would delegate that regal responsibility to Father Ox. Would you like to wash the feet tonight? We were talking about different scenarios, right? There's 12 people who will come up. He could do 6, I could do 6. Or we could just go down the line together. I'll do the right foot, he could do the left foot. Father Michael's here, so maybe we could just get him to wash the feet and that'll settle this one. We could take a poll. Who would you rather have wash your feet? I'm going to be the one washing the feet tonight. And it's an absolute privilege. I mean that sincerely. It's an absolute privilege. And it's a sign that is so important for me to experience as much as for you to see. That I, as pastor, having the highest position in the church, arguably the most power, must exercise this power through service. Now, this whole homily, it's been about the ministerial priesthood, and there's only 3 of us here tonight. 2 other guys, Deacon Ronan and our seminarian Arian, who are on the road. But what about the rest of you, right? The hundreds of others and those watching who are not priests. How does this apply to you? I want to propose 2 ways that you can respond to this message. The first is to examine your own thinking. Perhaps we have been influenced by the deconstruction of our day, and there's some positive elements to it, but there's also ways in which we need to be careful. And how do we think about power? How do we think about the church and real problems in the church? And I would just challenge you to submit your perspective on power to Jesus. Be open to a renewal, to a renovation, rather than a deconstruction. So that's the first, to examine your thinking. The second is to pray for priests. As I'm washing the feet this evening, pray for me. After Mass, we're going to go down to this altar of repose down in the auditorium downstairs, and you're welcome to stick around to pray. We'll be able to pray there in the garden, as the apostles were praying with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, right until midnight. You can come back and pray if you wish. That's another chance to pray. And over the last number of years, whenever I go home, my dad says to me, "Simon, I pray for your humility. I'm praying for your humility." And he says it often, and it's kind of like, well, what are you trying to say? Why do you have to keep praying for that? And earlier today, as I was working on this homily, I was writing about this and thinking about my dad, who keeps praying for my humility. And I got choked up because I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that somebody is praying for my humility, and I'm going to beg you to pray as well, because the reconstruction, the renovation that needs to happen in this priest's heart is real, and some of that involves more humility. And so please pray for me. Pray for all of your priests. We need it. I love being a priest. I genuinely do. And I believe that Jesus is calling young men today to the priesthood still. He respects your free will. He's not going to force anybody, but he waits for young men to surrender their lives, to say, yes, I'll follow you in this particular vocation. It's a fulfilling life, and it's a profound mystery. And I mean that because even after almost 13 years of being a priest, I still really have no idea what I'm doing. I don't even understand what this is. It's a profound mystery. Celibacy alone is a profound mystery. You can laugh at that. So there's like this awkward laughter. Let me tell you something. Celibacy is no laughing matter. No, there are days when I feel the ache, of having given up the chance to be married, to have sex, to have children of my own. And I have to remind myself, well, Jesus was celibate. St. Paul was celibate. And they encouraged it, and they were single-hearted in their devotion to the Father's plan. I'll never get rich as a priest. I picked the wrong profession if that was the hope. I haven't taken the vow of poverty, but Father Alex and I, as companions, we make a promise of simplicity of life. And I just think about all the different aspects of my priesthood, just living it so imperfectly. I feel sorry for you, really, that you got me as pastor. I just realized I have so little to offer, and I just need so much more of Jesus in my life. But my desire is that as I continue to be conformed to Jesus as his priest, as Simon decreases, as Jesus increases, that people would look at me, people would look at Father Alex, people would look at Father Michael and any priest, and they would not see a guy who is pursuing power, but they would see a guy who is pursuing service, who is pursuing sacrifice, and doing so joyfully. That when people look at a Catholic priest, they would be forced to ask the question, what in this world is he living for? And the answer is nothing. That guy must be living for something beyond. And may my life and that of every priest inspire in others the search for Jesus.